slaves, a very high percentage of them came from Western Nigerian ports. And in America today, you see a very large movement of African Americans who say that they're the real chosen people, that they're the children of Israel, they're the Judeans. You know, so what are they just trying to create an identity for themselves because they were slaves, or is there really something here? And the answer is, most likely there is something there. And most likely, maybe that they...
Jude. World hit. Known to European... February 17. Of Judah. This is from Press and Bulletin's magazine. Language doc from the Society of Geography. Wahida.
We know now that they're fulfilling prophecies by saying, we're coming back.
Sub-Saharan West Africa is an interesting place, especially a little place called the Slave Coast, in which the slave traders called Negro Land. As you can see, the area of the Slave Coast was called Wahida. And if you look right above it, in English are the words Kingdom of Judah. This is the port where the so-called African or Negro American was taken. Also to the British Islands, South America, and Europe. This area was called Kingdom of Judah. Well, maybe they just called it that, like a nickname or something. But actual Hebrews didn't live there. Well, let's take a look. This is from Press and Bulletin's magazine. Language doc from the Society of Geography. Wahida, also called Fida, Huida, Uida, Judah or Judah, is an ancient city frequented since the 16th century by Portuguese slave traders who gave it its name. Its inhabitants were said were Judaic and were viewed as the remnant of the scattered tribes of Israel. This quote is from Creole New Orleans, Race and Americanization by Arnold R. Hirsch and Joseph Logsdon. Between June 1719 and January 1731, 16 slave trading ships arrived in Louisiana from the Senegal region. 6 ships came from Judah, Wida, a slave trading post. Between February 1726 and January 1731, 12 slave ships from Senegal landed. 3,259 slaves at Belize at the mouth of the Mississippi River. During the same period, 1 ship from Judah landed 464 slaves at the same port. The African slaves brought to the Chesapeake during the 18th century came mainly from the Bight of Biafra and were heavily Igbo. Here's a couple of more quotes from The Earth and Its Inhabitants, the Universal Geography. East of the Great Popo begins the Dahomey territory, guarded by the important town of Gluia. Known to Europeans by various names, Fida, Habida, Waida, Ouida. The old writers called it Judah. Its inhabitants were said to be the Jews. During the flourishing days of the slave trade from 16 to 18,000 were annually transported from Judah, as the Portuguese called this place, which at that time had a population of 35,000. Part of the local trade is in the hands of the Mavumbas, a people of grave and solemn aspect with intelligent eyes, straight or even eloquent nose, whose pronounced Semitic type have earned them the Portuguese designation of Judos Pretos, or Black Jew. I don't know how much more proof you need, but I'm going to give you some more. Who by chance financed and organized these Portuguese slave traders who discovered the Kingdom of Judah on the slave coast? Meet Aaron Lopez, born Duarte Lopez. He was a Jewish Portuguese slave trader. Through his varied commercial ventures, he became the wealthiest person in Newport, Rhode Island, in British America in 1761 and 1762. Lopez expanded his trade beyond the North American coastline by 1757. He had major interests in the West Indian slave trade. He also sent ships to Europe and the Canary Islands between 1761 and 1774. As we established earlier, it was the Marrano Jews who controlled the slave trade, which some were Portuguese and Dutch. It was written on their maps that the slave coast was actually the Judeans of Israel, or Yehuda. So that would mean that they would have some info about the sub-Saharan Africans, right? This is a quote from Stephen Jacobs, European Jewish historian. from his book, The Hebrew Heritage of Black Africa, fully documented. Black Americans are now in a position as never before in modern history to rediscover and reclaim, if they wish, a heritage which has profoundly influenced world history and mankind, the Hebrew heritage of Black Africa. So since we've established, without dispute, that not only did the true Israelites flee into sub-Saharan Africa, but that the scripture also agrees that the dispersed of Israel are beyond the rivers of Cush, and from there were transported as slaves into every nation, not for the first time, but actually the third time around. The first time and the second times were in the known world, the third time into the new world. And seeing that it was by the witness of 2 or 3 that every word is established according to scripture, that would be right on the nose. Now, the last thing we need to consider is the Ashkenazi and Sephardic Jews' location. Since 98% of the people who claim to be Jews are self-proclaimed Ashkenazi Jews. Well, who was Ashkenaz? Was he one of the sons of Jacob? No. Actually, he's the grandson of Japheth, the ancestor of Germany, a European country. So how can the ancestor of Germany be Hebrew when it's the Hebrews who descend from Shem? Well, one might say that they didn't descend from Ashkenaz, but rather they were just Jews who were living in the area of Ashkenaz. Well, then you have a bigger problem. If 98% of all the Jews in the world were in Germany or Russia, since 98% of the world's Jews are Ashkenazi, then how could any Jews be scattered anywhere else? Doesn't the Bible say they would go captive into every nation? Also, if almost 100% of all the Jews in the world were in Germany, why would the Bible say they were in Cush, Egypt, and Assyria, and Arabia? Was there not one Jew in those areas? Also, if every Jew was in Germany or Russia, why does the Bible not even mention them places as places they were scattered to? Not in a single prophecy. Also, let's not leave out the 2% of so-called Sephardic Jews. Who were they? 2 Kings 17, verses 24 through 25. And the king of Assyria brought men from Babylon, and from Kuhath, and from Ava, and from Hamath, and from, catch it, Sepharvaim, and placed them in the cities of Samaria instead of the children of Israel. And they possessed Samaria, and they dwelt in the cities thereof. And so it was at the beginning of their dwelling there that they feared not the Lord. Therefore the Lord sent lions among them and slew some of them. Strong's H 56:16. Sepharvaim, meaning the two Sephiras. Sepharjim or Sepharim. As you can see, that the Sephardic, who are the Sepharim, are not Hebrews. Yet according to them, 100% of the world's Jews were in Spain and Germany. Why? Pretty simple. 98% of the world's Jews are Ashkenazi, were in Germany, and the rest, the 2%, are Sephardic. That makes 100%. I didn't realize that Spain and Germany is counted as every nation, or that Spain and Germany is also called Egypt, Cush, Assyria, Babylon, and Ethiopia, for that matter. You almost have to live under a rock not to know of or hear about the Middle East conflict, aka the Jewish people versus Palestine. In 1948, Israel gained the status of statehood, but at the cost of freedom of another. Ever since, the Palestinian people and the Israelis have been at perpetual war. As we have proven in parts 1 through 4, the Jewish people are in fact Ukrainians from an area formerly called Khazaria, as attested by their own Jewish historians, scholars, and rabbis. The Palestinians, on the other hand, have a why wasn't the slaves allowed to speak their language or write their language, but forced to write English and speak English? Well, when you look into the actual language that they wrote and spoken, you will see why these things had to be covered up.
This is First African Baptist Church, the oldest black church in North America. The building, built by slaves. The gentleman that laid the first brick laid the last. The balcony hold pews that actually were built by slaves. They have the oldest information in this building. That information is written in cursive Hebrew writing. That information is written in cursive Hebrew writing. That information is written in cursive Hebrew writing. Written in cursive Hebrew writing. Hebrew writing. Hebrew writing. Hebrew writing.
The slaves founded First African Baptist in 1777, writing cursive Hebrew on the pews, proving first of all, not only could they read and write, but the language that they wrote was Hebrew. So it was not that the blacks could not read or write, but that they could not read or write English. Sound familiar? Deuteronomy 28, verse 49. And the Lord shall bring a nation against thee from far, from the end of the earth, as swift as that eagle flieth, a nation whose tongue thou shalt not understand. Now once you put the facts together, that not only did they read and write Hebrew, but many had Hebrew names, were circumcised on the 8th day, practiced Levitical laws of clean and unclean, and had a priesthood among them that they considered to be living sacrifices, you start to get the picture. Even more interesting is the fact that slaves were writing Hebrew in 1777, when modern Hebrew, which is spoken by the Ashkenazi Jews, did not exist until 1881. Facts. In parts 1 through 4 of this documentary, we address the Deuteronomy 28 curses, the most controversial of which, for those who would try to deny this truth, is the 68th verse. Deuteronomy 28 and 68. And the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships, by the way whereof I spake unto thee, and thou shalt see it no more again. And there you shall be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen, and no man shall redeem you. We've already established how Egyptos, or Mitzrayim, means bondage, and how the curse states not that they would return to the landmass of Egypt, but rather go into bondage or spiritual Egypt into all nations. Deuteronomy 28, verse 25. And the Lord shall cause thee to be smitten before thy enemies. Thou shalt go out one way against them, and flee 7 ways before them, and shall be removed unto all the kingdoms of the earth. Deuteronomy 28, verse 64. And the Lord shall scatter thee among all people, from one end of the earth even unto the other. And there thou shalt serve other gods, which neither thou nor thy fathers have known, even wood and stone. We've also addressed how America is a spiritual Egypt, being that Egypt was their most severe slavery until 70 AD, harder than the Babylonian and Assyrian captivities. But America has been the most severe slavery of any people since Egypt or any other period, and also the longest captivity, seeing that the Hebrews were not oppressed or enslaved in Egypt until around the time of the birth of Moses.
nevertheless, these people are not the true biblical Hebrews. They suffered great